In 1865, just days before his assassination, Abraham Lincoln wrote, "I see in the near future a crisis approaching that unnerves me and causes me to tremble for the safety of my country. Corporations have been enthroned. An era of corruption in high places will follow, and the money power of the country will endeavor to prolong its reign by working upon the prejudices of the people until the wealth is aggregated in a few hands and the republic is destroyed." In America, the change from an economy based on agriculture to one based on manufacturing brought several large shifts in culture. Young and old people seeking independent lifestyles sought wages. Sometimes entire families would pack up to work in mills that seemed less demanding than labor-intensive farming. The first decades of mill life were a learning process for both the owners and the new class of operators. The mill needed to be run on very specific timetables to maintain efficient production and avoid bottlenecks. In contrast to farm work, wherein workers would largely come and go independently, mill owners invented the idea of clocking in and out to keep hands in their seats. Farmers' children who left to work in mills were surprised to be made to work past dark, which traditionally signaled the end of the workday. In this way, the requirements of efficiency and efficient production would come to dictate how people scheduled their lives. The first textile mills were very paternalistic. The mill owners were responsible for their workers and for instilling ideas of hard work and obedience. They enforced strict rules on dress, social engagement, alcohol consumption, and church attendance. There was a social contract between the owners, who saw themselves as responsible for the workers, and the workers, who often saw themselves as indebted to the owners for the opportunity to work. The workers, a mix of young and old people, transients, and experienced hands who traveled from mill to mill, would have been housed on site in company-built dormitories, with a local company store, meaning that their livelihoods and fortunes would be explicitly tied to their continued employment. In Philadelphia, in 1869, the Knights of Labor was formed in sworn secrecy. Their goal, endeavoring to associate their labors, to establish cooperative institutions which will supersede the wage system by the introduction of a cooperative industrial system. The Knights called for the public ownership of railroads and other commercial transport, of the telegraph and telephones, water systems and utilities, for the 8-hour day, equal pay for equal work, abolition of contract, convict, and child labor, and that the public lands, the heritage of all the people, be reserved for actual settlers, not an acre for railroad speculators. The sworn secrecy ended a decade later when the Knights of Labor entered politics. They were not a trade union. It was organized geographically rather than by occupation. It was the original one big union, the forerunner of both the IWW and the CIO. Workers were admitted regardless of skill, trade, industry, or sex. They were one of the first organizations to include white and black workers in the same union. The Knights of Labor was also one of the first to include women, with over 50,000 women members at its peak, including many housewives whom the Knights of Labor recognized as workers. Susan B. Anthony was heavily involved with the Knights of Labor. The Knights had three major aims: strikes to attain worker parity with the bosses, the Greenback movement to allow a freer monetary system, and cooperatives to create an alternative economy. The cooperative system ran between 50 and 60 stores in 1883. Within a decade, it was hundreds more, consisting of at least 22 worker-owned mines, flour mills, 15 coopers, foundries, knitting co-ops, cigars and glass manufactories, printers, brass workers, etc., etc., etc. Cooperative shops and stores sold these at cost to other cooperative members. A booming ecosystem, an alternative economy was growing at an unrivaled pace. The purpose: securing the greatest good for the greatest number, and place the man who is willing to toil upon his own homestead. Capitalists viewed the Knights as a dangerous competitor. They cut off loans, credit, supplies, markets, and transportation in efforts to kill the insurgent cooperatives. New theories on how to arrange the economy bloomed around these cooperatives. Large groups of cooperatives would band together to be run in joint management under committee. Foremen were appointed for 3-month terms. Non-interest-bearing shares were offered to individuals and labor organizations, and redeemable after 1 year. Investors could not determine which co-op their funds would be used for, as the money would be put to development and prosperity, not for profit return. There is a large focus on the store, where resources and products made by the cooperatives would be sold to the public. In Victor Drury's 1885 book, The Polity of the Labor Movement, he laid out a plan for the store, or cooperative center of exchange. Products would be sold, quote, with a very slight augmentation in price, which should only be provisionally, and until we could sell at cost those commodities which we should produce ourselves as soon as we begin to manufacture. So soon as we could find sale for sufficient of the products of any of the industries we have mentioned to employ a few producers, we should establish a workshop or center of production. For instance, if we sold sufficient bread and pastry to employ 4 or 5 bakers, we should immediately establish a bakery. We should then call upon the trades union to furnish us with the most skilled and capable men in their special industries to direct these centers of production. The Depression of 1883 to 85 hit the working population hard and damaged the movement. Wages across the U.S. fell 15%, and capitalists took the opportunity to consolidate and grow, buying cheap on the backs of bankrupted farmers and craftsmen, absorbing them back into the wage system, and robbing them of their arts. Hard times, capitalist backlash, and shrinking membership struck a fierce blow on the cooperative system in its infancy. And many powerful monopolists sought to strangle it in the manger. Most cooperatives were not prepared for the cutthroat competition seeking to destroy them. In one example, railroad companies refused to load coal that Appalachian mining cooperatives dug from the ground in an attempt to suffocate them. As John Curl lays out in his book, For All the People, quote, they pursued that American dream of independence and self-employment at a time when the economic system was making the fulfillment of that dream impossible for increasingly large numbers. They were humanists in an era of robber barons. As the Knights of Labor lost its course and disintegrated, the cooperatives lost their compass and heart. By 1889, most were forced to shut their doors, as the economic depression, caused by the capitalist mismanagement of production, proved devastating. But the economic downturn was not enough to kill the cooperatives. They could have made a resurgence, but capitalism turned to the political system to prevent this. In 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed. American industry was controlled by conspiracies of trusts, central boards representing many different supposedly competing companies, which held a strong monopoly over the economy. From For All the People, quote, the enormous spoils in the wake of the Civil War had been dished out, and financiers and industrialists settled down to rule different sections of the economy like medieval barons from behind corporate facades, feuding and collaborating depending on which was beneficial. The largest contributed heavily to both the Democratic and Republican parties, who had made their peace as the twin pillars of the capitalist system. End quote. Ironically, the Antitrust Act was passed by Congress due to intense lobbying from labor, farmers, and small businesses. But they were not involved in its crafting. What was created was a final solution to kill the cooperative dream that had challenged the capitalist monopoly. The Sherman Antitrust Act outlawed cooperatives engaged in interstate commerce, and unions organized in interstate strikes. Agricultural co-ops, the farmers who had demanded trust busting, requested an exemption because their livelihoods depended on the co-ops. They were refused. The Sherman Act closed off the option of a cooperative alternative. It was used to break strikes 12 times, but never once to break a trust. The economy collapsed again in 1893, and the country again descended into depression. The monopolists of the day added the destroyed and vulnerable resources of the cooperatives to their immense fortunes, and the dream of a cooperative economy disappeared into the wind. The possibility for an economy based on cooperation had closed. From then on, Americans would be doomed to subject themselves to the wage system in order to survive.